Anyway, thank you guys for coming back. But before we get started, just real quick, there is some material out on the table to the left. And as we know, we live in really interesting times. And there are a lot of controversies out there. And when our young people leave home, whether they go to college or into the workforce, whether it's friends, whether it's social media or whatever, they're going to be hitting a lot of challenges to the Christian faith. And unfortunately, all too often, our young people aren't quite prepared to handle it. So that's in part what was the genesis of starting this series of talks. But these are good, but there's even more resources. We live in a time where there's unprecedented challenges of the Christian faith, but we also have unprecedented resources to help prepare our young people. And there's information material out there, feel free to take it, talking about 3 different courses that they could take, all of which my kids have gone through. Not all have gone through all of them, but each of my kids has gone through at least some of them. And I highly, highly recommend them. One is a program called Student Leadership University. It's basically a 4-year program, a week each summer, a week or 2. And it teaches leadership principles through the Christian perspective. So the first year is in Orlando, teaching basic leadership. The second year, they go to Washington, D.C., where they meet with the chaplain of the Senate. They meet with Senate staffers. They learn a lot about the government, workings of the government. The third year is actually in Europe. And they go to Oxford, London, Paris, Normandy. I have one of my kids right there went through that, as a matter of fact. And and it's just and the 4th year is in Israel. And it's just a fabulous program. So it's called Student Leadership University. Highly recommend it. The second is one called Impact 360, which is down in Georgia. And it's also a tremendous program. It's basically a 10-day program. They've got some top-notch speakers, people like Sean McDowell, Brett Kunkel, Jonathan Morrow. And again, they spend what we're doing today over the course of 10 days and teach kids how to understand the culture in which they live, how to respond. You know, for example, one of the things that Sean McDowell teaches at Impact 360 is how to watch a movie. Because everything you see in culture is sending a message, has a worldview behind it. Every song, every TV show, every movie, it has a worldview behind it. It's selling a message. And oftentimes, if we're not paying attention, we can sort of absorb passively some of these other worldviews. And so one of the things that Sean does is he teaches people how to look at these shows and then say, okay, where's the worldview? You know, what's the message being sent to me here? And does this correspond with the Christian faith? And what challenges does it raise? So Impact 360 is another program. And then finally, one called Summit Ministries. And Summit Ministries is a 2-week program. Alycia has spoken many times. She's going to talk about it in just a second. But it's a program they have out in Manitou Springs, Colorado, just outside of Colorado Springs, also one in Georgia. And again, it's a 2-week program where they bring in some of the best thinkers, the best top-notch speakers who really have a passion for helping young people work through the questions that they're struggling with. Again, I've got information. Some of it's a bit outdated, but you can use that to go online and find the more updated information. So if you have young people in your life, whether you're a young person yourself thinking about this, whether you have kids, you have grandkids of this age, I would highly recommend taking a look at some of that material, and if at all possible, you can help your young people get to these programs. It is an investment that literally could pay off in eternity. So, with that being said, Alycia, you can share your perspective on Summit and then get us rolling.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I just messaged somebody, and I hope that they get back to me. I strongly recommend to you Summit. Ministries. They run multiple 2-week sessions, 2-week camps. And these 2-week camps run for like 7 weeks, whatever it is, 8 sessions throughout the summer. So you just need to find a 2-week window in the summer that works. And if I had known about Summit, I would have gone. I would have begged to have gone. It's not cheap. It's about $2,400 for the 2 weeks, but it includes all your housing, all of your meals, all of the materials and things like that. And what I'm waiting for is I do have a discount code for you. So as soon as I get a text message back, I just message somebody there because I can't remember what the code is. But I do have a discount code that's like 10% off, so it's like $240, something like that, whatever it might be, that I'll give to you as soon as they send it to me. So with that said, it's just, I'll tell you now, and I tell this to parents all the time, your kids are asking questions, and somebody's going to answer them. If you don't answer them, then I get your kids when they go to college, and I get invited to come in as a guest speaker, and I get all your kids when they walk away. When they walked away in college because somebody didn't deal with the questions, and somebody else answered them in college, and now they no longer believe. So it's happened to me multiple times. I used to get, it doesn't happen as much anymore, but I used to get messages from moms, can you please go to my child's university? Can you please speak there? They've walked away. And so Summit deals with the hard questions. They are not going to baby you. They're not going to baby the children. They're going to deal with abortion. They're going to deal with sexuality. I do a lot of their gender stuff. They'll deal with mental health. They'll deal with hiddenness of God. They'll deal with Old Testament and genocides and all the things. So it is meant to science of, it's meant to equip and get young people thinking and have answers to what they're going through. So it's 14 to, I think it might be 14 or 14 to like 22, something like that. It's kind of the age ranges. Okay, does that sound right? Okay. So definitely would recommend that for you as well. All right, you ready? Okay. Now let's do it. I've given the disclaimer, right? This first part is going to be pretty much a breeze in terms of just, I'm going to give a little bit of background kind of a thing. And then I'll get to the part that's going to be a little bit more intense when I talk about what puberty blockers do to your body and the changes that will happen as a result of taking testosterone and estrogen. So I will tell you, so if you think you can't quite handle it, it might be too much, and you need to step out, that's okay. But that won't happen until we get to the medical stuff, and you'll know, okay, she's starting medical. One of the things that is oftentimes, let me just say this, sorry. If you want to hear a shorter version of this again, episode 5 on the podcast, we'll talk about this. It'll be about a 40-minute version, okay? Also, if you go to YouTube and type in, I think, therefore I'm trans, Alycia Wood, you'll see about a 55-minute version of this, okay? So you can find another version, episode 5. Episode 6 deals with intersex, and episode 7 deals with Imani Khalif, the Olympic boxer. I don't know if you remember that situation with the Paris thing, and there was like, there's this trans woman who's boxing against the woman. That's actually not at all what happened. Imani was not a trans person at all. Imani actually has an intersex condition. And I'll talk about what was going on with Imani. Okay, so you can hear it again if you need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm taking a 2-hour talk, and I'm going to try and give you an hour of it, is essentially what I'm going to do. Okay, so we're going to kind of fly through this kind of thing. With this particular topic, it's often phrased as Christians or conservatives or Republicans versus Democrats or liberals or the trans community. In other words, it's the Christians are the ones who are fighting against it. And what I want to show you is that that's actually not true. And one of the reasons that's not true is because most Christians are like, we don't know what to do with this. No pastor, when they went to seminary, learned, hey, this is how you determine whether or not Jesus is divine. And by the way, this is how you determine what a male and a female is. Okay? They didn't learn that in seminary. So this is like new for, and the parents, that, you know that special book that you got when you delivered your first child, and it tells you how to raise a child perfectly so that they will always serve the Lord and never veer? Remember that magical book you got? Okay, they left out the trans chapter, okay? So all that to say, parents were never taught this because nobody gives parents a handbook to tell them how to raise kids, especially to deal with something like this. So parents feel very much like, oh boy. And then Christians and pastors and other leaders are trying to sort this out. So just to show you that this is not about Christians versus the trans community, Christians actually are not the loudest voices on this, I am not going to use a single Christian source throughout this talk. Everybody I reference you is going to be a non-Christian or maybe a secular Jew, so Jewish by blood but not by practice. I'm not referencing any Christians at all until I get to the part that says, God help us. Now you know we're talking about Christianity, okay? But until then, none of this is Christian. So I'm just using journals, I'm using medical stuff, I'm using journalists and different things like that. All right, so let me just give you a definition of gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is simply a disconnect between the sex assigned at birth and the gender identity one identifies as. So the sex identified at birth, or assigned at birth, people like to say, and the gender identity somebody identifies as. In other words, you're born, the doctor says, it's a girl, it's a boy, but you grew up and you feel something different. Many people think that people in the trans community deny that they have a biological description, and they don't, actually. They don't deny the biology. They just say the biology got it wrong, okay? So in other words, what they'll say is, I have this feeling or this sense, or I'm more similar, and I'm going to use me as an example, I'm more similar to a male. Therefore, I must be a male, and my physical body that's female got it wrong. Okay? So they acknowledge that there's a biological reality, but it is not to be listened to because it was incorrect. And because this is what I identify as, I should be able to live in what makes me most comfortable. Okay? So the idea is that gender and sex are separated. When I was growing up, when you filled out a form, what's your name, what's your address, what's your gender, male, female. We used to use these words interchangeably. Or what's your sex, male, female. We used to use these words just kind of the same. Now it's being pulled apart. So gender is like an expression or an experience or feeling, and then sex is the biological reality. Okay, I need to do some terms because people get so confused with some of these terms, and I understand why. So when you hear non-binary, gender fluid, gender neutral, gender queer, these kind of words, these all reference people identify as another gender, whether it means they're no gender, both genders, or on a gender spectrum. Okay? So non-binary, binary simply meaning the male-female binary. So I don't adhere to the male-female binary. I'm non-binary. That's what it means when they talk about binary. So I don't identify as either male or female. Or maybe I'm both male or female, or maybe I'm female here, but I'm male sometimes too or something. Gender fluid, so it can go back and forth. Gender neutral, I'm not either gender. And gender queer is just another way of saying I don't identify as one of those binaries and things like that. All right, a trans man and trans woman, these are always confusing people, so let me see if I can break it down. I'm a biological woman. Because I'm a biological woman, I can't be a trans woman. Okay? Because in other words, I can't transition to woman because I'm already a woman. So I'm a biological woman, therefore the only thing I can be is a trans man, which means I transitioned to man. So a trans man is someone who is biologically female, transitioned to male, and a trans woman is a biological male transitioned to female. Okay? So that's how you kind of keep it clear in your head. You transitioned to woman, you transitioned to male. All right. So let me give you a little bit of lay of the land with some statistics here. According to the Williams Institute, 300,000 young people, or 1.4% of youth between the ages of 13 to 17, identify as transgender. So about 1.4% between 13 and 17. According to the CDC in 2023, 3.3% of U.S. high school students identified as transgender, while 2.2% identified as questioning. So 3.3% of students in high school identify as trans, 2.2% of them identified as questioning. Now, beyond these numbers, we know there's been a massive rise in the number of people identifying as trans over the last 16, 17, 18 years. Okay? So historically, what happened is 2, 3, 4-year-old little boys said, hey, I really like wearing mommy's high heels, or I want to wear makeup like mommy, or I'm a girl like mommy. So 2, 3, 4-year-old little boys, that's historically what transgenderism was about, or gender dysphoria was about. And what we would do historically is we just let them grow up, become adult men, and if they then wanted to transition, they could transition. We could put them on estrogen, etc. But there was a study that came out in 2011 called the Dutch Protocol. The Dutch Protocol. There was a follow-up that came out in 2014. What the Dutch Protocol said is it said, look, when you wait to transition people as adult men, it's harder for them to pass as women. Because when they've already transitioned to adult, when they're already adult men, they already have facial hair and body hair and lower voices. It's harder for them to pass as women. So what we need to do is, and it'll make people happier if we transition them younger, because they'll be happier that they can pass for a woman as an adult, because we would have transitioned them younger. So they advocated for giving puberty blockers to kids starting at age 12, cross-sex hormones, so that's estrogen or testosterone, at age 16, and surgery as young as 18. Okay? So 12 years old for puberty blockers, 16 for estrogen or testosterone, and 18 for surgery. The idea was that if you did it when they were younger, it's easier to make a 12-year-old little boy look like a female than a 32-year-old man look like a female. And therefore, they would be happier because they look more like females. Okay? So basically what this did is it pushed the transitioning of people to a younger age. Instead of transitioning adults, we're transitioning children. So this protocol, the Dutch protocol, came out, and it went and became the standard for medical care across the world. So WPATH, I don't know if you've heard about WPATH, W-P as in Paul, A-T-H, WPATH, stands for the World Professional Association on Transgender Health. And what WPATH did is WPATH became the organization, or they were the organization, that advises the medical community around the world on how to treat people with gender dysphoria. And they use the result of the Dutch protocol that it's better to transition minors, and they use that to advise medical communities around the world that we need to be transitioning minors. And that became the standard of care for how we deal with young people with gender dysphoria. And so you can imagine the transitioning of minors increased significantly, especially amongst young girls who suffered from mental health conditions. Sweden's Board of Health and Welfare confirmed a 1,500% rise between 2008 and 2018 in gender dysphoria diagnoses amongst 13 to 17-year-olds born as girls. Of this group, 32.4% had diagnoses for anxiety, 28.9% had depression, 19.4% had ADHD, and 15.2% had autism. I call this the golden four. You will find at least one, if maybe not two or more conditions present in somebody before, not after, before they ever have feelings of gender dysphoria. So the depression is there before the gender dysphoria. The autism is there before the gender dysphoria. So in other words, they are already struggling with mental health things, and gender dysphoria, the transition is seen as the solution to their pain. You will see that in both girls, boys, adults, men and women, both. We discovered this when a woman, Lisa Littman, who was a former OBGYN, began working in public health, and she started noticing that on Facebook, young girls were coming out as trans. But it wasn't just when one girl came out as trans, it was when all the other girls in her friend group would come out as trans with her. So girls weren't transitioning alone, they would transition in groups. And she's like, this is odd. Why is this happening? So she formed a hypothesis because she noticed that for 65% of these girls, the gender dysphoria came after a long time of being heavily immersed in social media. 65% of these girls, gender dysphoria came after their immersion in social media. So she formed a hypothesis: peer contagion, or what's commonly referred to as rapid onset gender dysphoria. Rapid onset gender dysphoria. In other words, remember I was saying how it was 2, 3, 4-year-old little boys that were typically the ones that were struggling with their gender? Now we're seeing young people grow up perfectly fine being male or female, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue at 15, Mom, I'm a boy. What? Alycia, you've always been a girl, you've been fine. Yeah, but I'm a boy now. So it's coming in out of nowhere. Rapid onset gender dysphoria. She did some demographics on this group, and here's what she found. The vast majority had zero history of gender dysphoria as children. So once again, I should tell you, she did a study, I believe it was 256 parents whose children identified as gender dysphoria, as struggling with gender dysphoria. That's what this survey is. 256 parents. It was a 90-question survey, so a pretty good long survey. Here's what she found. The vast majority had zero history of gender dysphoria as children. Okay, so once again, not your stereotypical 2, 3, 4-year-old little boys. It just comes up when they're in their teenage years. A majority of them had one or more psychiatric diagnoses, and almost half were engaging in self-harm prior to the onset of gender dysphoria. Okay, so again, guys, the mental health conditions are there, the self-harm is there, and then they identify as having gender dysphoria. Nearly 70% belonged to a peer group where somebody came out as trans, so there's the social influence. 65% increased their social media time right before coming out as trans. Over 90% of the surveyed parents were white. Over 85% of parents supported gay marriage. Over 88% of parents supported transgender rights. These are not homophobic or transphobic families. They're actually completely in support of LGBTQIA+. But less than 13% believe that their child's mental health improved after identifying as trans. In fact, 47% said it got worse. In other words, what they're saying is they're totally in support of the LGBTQI movement, but they're just saying, not my child, though. This doesn't fit her. This doesn't fit my son. Something's wrong here. And so the Dutch protocol failed the medical community, guys. Because what the Dutch protocol did is it studied mostly male, and what we're seeing is this massive rise in female. And it studied mostly male instead of female, and they were all mentally healthy, actually. The study also didn't account for the large number of detransitioners, and it did include them in the follow-up. They also didn't mention that somebody died as a result of the surgery, probably bottom surgery. You call it top and bottom surgery, that somebody died as a result of the surgery. They didn't mention that. People always ask me, but Alycia, why would any sensible parent do this? Well, number one, some parents are actually completely okay with all of this. Some parents actually don't see a problem. Some parents are raising their kids right now, and you're like, oh, you have a 3-year-old, is it a boy or girl? I don't know, they'll tell me when they get older. So some parents are actually completely okay with this kind of a thing. But other parents actually went to the therapist and the doctors for help. See, when their 13-year-old son said that he was a girl, in that little magic handbook that they hand all the parents when they birth their first child, they couldn't find the transgender chapter. So they go to the doctor or they go to the therapist, the people who are supposed to be the scholars, the knowledgeable people, the professionals. And they are told that if you do not transition your child, they will commit suicide. The problem, guys, is that it was a lie. There was not a single study, not a single one that showed that if you do not transition a child, they will commit suicide. There was not one study that showed that. The closest we had is the UK clinic called Tavistock, which was the big gender clinic in the UK. This was their main clinic. And over I don't even know how many years it was open, 20 years, 15 years, I have no idea how long it was open. But they saw 15,000 patients, about 15,000 patients over those years. Of the 15,000 patients that they saw, 4 committed suicide. 2 were getting treatment. They were getting help. The other two were on the wait list waiting to get help because they were so backed up. That is very different than telling a parent they will commit suicide. So when it comes to me and I say I want to transition to be a boy, my parents are freaking out. They go to the doctor says, if you don't transition her, she's going to commit suicide. And the line that they like to use is, would you rather have a dead daughter or an alive son? That was the line they used. And so parents panicked. They freaked out. They trusted the professionals. And now what's happening, with all the detransitioners, people going back to the original biological sex, is the guilt the parents feel now. Because they were just trying to help. They didn't know. They trusted. And they made these decisions. And now their child regrets it and has permanent lifelong damage. That's why parents have done it. I will say, doctors themselves feel under pressure. Therapists themselves feel under pressure. Again, some doctors and therapists completely affirm this. Others know that their licensing is at risk if they don't go along with it. So, why is it that girls transition? I'm going to look at girls, we're going to look at boys, we're going to look at adult men and adult women, okay? Because it's kind of similar reasons, but also some unique ones depending on the person. Why do girls transition? Well, it isn't so much, I'll say this, they're going through puberty, they don't like themselves, they don't like their bodies, they don't fit the stereotypes, like they don't like pink and they don't like dolls, which was totally my story as a kid. I loved navy blue, I loved blue. I didn't like pink, I liked blue. And I was a hockey player, I was an athlete, I was playing softball, I was doing sports, I loved dodgeball. So you know what they did? They just called me a tomboy. That was it. There was never a thought to like, maybe we need to transition Alycia. They were just like, well, let her play the sports then. She wants to climb trees, let her climb trees. She wants to ride bikes, let her ride bikes. That's it. But what's happening is so many girls and boys feel like they're not meshing with the cultural stereotypes. Oh, you're a girl and you don't like to play dolls and play house and play mommy and do makeup and nails? Oh, well, you're a boy and you don't want to like roll around and wrestle with me on the ground and you don't want to watch sports and you don't want to lift weights? You're more into arts and music and theater? Well, then you must not really be a boy. And if you're a girl and all you want to do is play sports and these things, well, you must not really be a girl. And so we've attached these outside stereotypes into what actually defines whether you're male or female. So when people don't fit into these stereotypes, they think something's wrong with them. So we need to pull some of those away and be careful the kind of the pressures we're putting on certain people. So here we go. Some of these girls have felt or have experienced abuse. Maybe they experienced abuse as a child, and they think if I become a boy, I can protect myself from abuse, or if I become a boy, nobody will abuse me. Well, that's not true, because boys get abused too. Some of these girls are bullied because they're tomboys. They're more masculine men. And they feel like, well, then the bullying really gets to them, right? So what you're seeing, guys, it isn't so much that they want to be a boy. It's more that they just don't want to be a girl. They're told when you grow up and you become a woman, you're going to get, the men are going to get jobs over you. They're going to get paid more. They're going to get the managerial positions. They're going to get the leadership positions. You won't get it as a woman. You're going to get mistreated. There'll be sexual harassment in the workplace. So they think even growing up and becoming a woman is horrible. And what you will see in both women, or both boys and girls, is you're going to see that actually, it isn't that they're trans, it's actually that they're gay. And this is one of the issues. Many of you don't realize it, but it's one of the issues that LGB has problems with the T. So the lesbian, gay, bi is pulling away from the T. One of the reasons that they are is because they're frustrated that people are transitioning instead of joining their community. So for example, me, I'm a lesbian, I'm 14 years old. I'm attracted to other girls. I don't like myself, and I think, you know what? Maybe the reason I like other girls and I like myself is because I'm really a boy. So if I transition and I become a boy, now I'm a boy attracted to girls and I'm heterosexual. I'm not a lesbian anymore. See, I was a lesbian here, but when I transition, I'm heterosexual. And so what's happening is parents are transitioning their children out of the lesbian, gay, and bi community. And the LGB is mad at the T for doing that. So you're transitioning them out of our community. So the tension between the two is very interesting to watch right now. And so these young girls actually rarely adopt the stereotypical habits of men. Like they don't become boys and start lifting weights all of a sudden. They don't all of a sudden watch football. So they don't pick up the stereotypical aspects of a boy. Now let's look at the boys. Why do some of the boys transition? Well, they don't feel masculine. They don't feel like something feels off. They don't feel right. Maybe they don't fit in. Maybe they're socially awkward. Maybe they're struggling. Maybe they're sensitive where they shouldn't be. Maybe they're just more feminine. Just because they're more feminine doesn't make them not a man. Just because a girl's more masculine doesn't make her not a woman. But they feel like something's wrong with me. I like these other things. Again, some of these boys are gay. And of course, in addition to the golden four, anxiety, depression, ADHD, autism, right? Those are all there in all of these situations as well. To some capacity, one or two or more of those conditions. Adult males. This is where it gets a little interesting. Why do adult men transition? The number one reason given is something called autogynephilia, which is when men are sexually aroused or get sexual pleasure of the thought of them dressed as a woman or being a woman. So they dress as a woman, and that is something that's very exciting for them. Which is why if you notice, a side thought, you notice that when they transition to women, they transition to this overly sexualized version of a woman. High heels, long hair, extensions on her nails, long nails, extra eyelashes to make them longer and extended, makeup, earrings, very tight clothes, shaved legs. Like they turn into these overly sexualized versions of females. Which leads you to the second one, which is narcissism. A lot of these men think of themselves as the best man there is. I am so great. I am the man. So it only makes sense that if I want to see what the perfect woman is, that I become her. Because I'm a perfect man, so therefore I can become the perfect woman. And then there also is, and I can't leave this one out, is the idea of pedophilia, which plays a part in all of this as well. Why do adult females transition? Abuse. Some of these women have been abused. They also fear that life as a woman would mean repeated assault and repeated abuse, getting looked over for promotion. So some adult women just say, I can't do it. It's better for me to live as a man. And then you're going to see additional mental health conditions. You might see multiple personality disorder in both adult men and women. You might see schizophrenia. You might see bipolar. And then, of course, you're going to see the, what I say is the golden four: depression, anxiety, ADHD, autism. So with that said, let's look at these medical treatments. Okay, this is where we're going to get a little heavy. How are we doing so far? Are we good? Okay. Are we 3 o'clock or 3:30?
We ended 3:30.
It's 3:30. Great. Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you. I couldn't remember if it was 3:30. Okay. All right. Let me talk to you about what transition actually looks like. I'm going to start here and kind of move my way across the stage here. So I'm going to use me. I am a 14-year-old girl. I don't enjoy puberty. Maybe I've got a lot of acne. Maybe I'm not as tall as I want to be. Maybe I'm shorter. Yeah, I'm shorter or whatever. Maybe I don't have like cool clothes like some of the other girls do. And I also am autistic and have anxiety. Okay? So as a result, I kind of spend a lot of time on social media, as a lot of girls my age do. And when I'm on social media is telling me the reason why I don't like myself is because I'm really a boy. And see, they on social media are saying, I was like you, Alycia. I didn't like being a girl either, but when I transitioned, then I became happy. So what you need to do is you need to transition and you'll be happy like me. So I think, okay, well, that makes sense. I'm 14. So I go and tell my parents, I think I'm a boy. I'm like, yeah, I want to change my name, and I want to go by he, him pronouns. Okay. That's the first stage. My parents are kind of like, we don't really know what to do about this. So they're trying to get help, and so they send me to the therapist. The therapist, after 1, maybe 2 visits, affirms that I have gender dysphoria and that I'm a boy. I will tell you, the people that I heard talk about this say it was 1 visit. Sometimes I've heard people say they get 2 visits, but usually it seems to be 1 visit. The therapist affirms that I'm a boy, and then they refer me to the doctor. At the doctor, they're going to put me on what's called puberty blockers. Puberty blockers are going to stop my puberty where it is. So if I'm at 10 years old and I haven't started at all, then it's going to not allow any puberty to continue. If I'm 14 and it's already started, then what's started, some of it might be there, some of it's going to be hindered by the puberty blockers, but it won't allow anything further to continue, okay? After X amount of time, it could be 2 months, it could be 2 years on puberty blockers, it's going to be different for everybody. I decide I want to go to the next step, which in my case is going to be testosterone. If I was a guy, that step would be estrogen. Okay, so I'm going to start taking testosterone, I'm going to start taking estrogen. And after X amount of time, it could be 3 years, it could be 5 years, it could be 3 months, okay? Different for everybody, but a lot of people stop at this stage, okay? But some people go to the next stage whenever they decide they want to, and that is surgery, okay? So top surgery and bottom surgery, what it's referred to, top surgery is breast removal or breast addition, and bottom surgery is adjusting genitalia to be more male or female, okay? Boy parts and girl parts. That's essentially what it is. And that journey is going to be a different amount of time for everybody. It's not going to be the same for everybody. But that's kind of where you go. And you know, once you do surgery, everything's permanent, okay? You can't reverse surgery. You can try and fix things, but you can't reverse everything that's been done. All right, so let me talk to you about puberty blockers. Puberty blockers can be given as soon as a child begins puberty, so as young as 9. People say they're reversible, but we really don't have any evidence for that because it's also new. So we'll have to see what is reversible and what's not. It delays sexual development and the start of women's periods. It slows bone growth, affecting one's height. So actually, some girls that are 26 or so that started puberty blocker, some men that started puberty blockers younger actually end up much shorter than they would have been had they not gone on puberty blockers, okay? Because it actually stunts their growth. And that's going to happen with girls too, but it's probably a little bit more noticeable in the men. Okay, I was trying to see if I may have gotten that Summit link. Okay, I'm going to tell you that link to Summit real quick because she messaged me. Let me see. Oh, it's Hey Alycia. That's why I didn't find it. Okay, I'll let this pull up. So if you want, what is it? summit.org/promotions/hey-Alycia. That's where you go. And maybe I'll shoot you the link, Greg, and you can send it out to people later. But it's going to be, if you want the discount code for, if you're interested in Summit, it's summit.org/promotions/hey-Alycia. And I can shoot that to Greg later on in case, you can't find it, and he can shoot it to you. Okay, just so we do have that code for you. All right, so the puberty blockers are going to make me a little shorter. Just so you know, Norway, Finland, Sweden, UK, France, and Denmark have stopped doing any sort of gender-affirming care, meaning they are no longer transitioning minors. They have turned to doing mental health counseling because they realize it's not working. There is an exception to this where a certain number of people that are in a controlled research study will be allowed to do transitioning. But it's got to be a controlled research study. They're not just going to hand this stuff out willy-nilly like they were doing before. Okay? But overwhelmingly, they reverted to doing mental health counseling because they found that transitioning is not actually the solution. Bone problems with bone density during puberty and with taking puberty blockers, their bones will be thinner and brittle. We're hearing stories of girls developing osteoporosis at 15 years old. And it also affects maturity. Now, let me tell you guys some interesting things about testosterone, okay? In utero, on the 7 to 8 week mark, if that baby is a male, the testes that the baby is forming is going to be producing testosterone. That testosterone is going to form the internal and external male genitalia, but it's also going to shoot to the brain And it's going to actually masculinize the brain. Okay? So when people say, is there a female brain and a male brain? Yes. Biologically, there is. And that happens while you're still in your mother's stomach. Okay? So let me give you an example. The way that the neurons fire is different. In women, they fire like a pulse, and in the men, it's more of a solid. Okay? So in other words, the brain is male or female before you're even born, because of the high doses of testosterone that flood to the brain. With that being said, again, in puberty, you have a massive flood of testosterone that shoots to the brain. This is important for male maturity, okay? And so what happens when you give these people puberty blockers, that dose doesn't happen. The second dose of testosterone doesn't happen, right? But that dose of testosterone is important. It deals with maturity, and as you imagine, it builds all of this courage and boldness and excitement and makes teenage boys want to jump off of really tall things and give their mothers heart attacks, right? And then we put vehicles in front of them that go 120 miles an hour, and they're like, yes, this is amazing, right? Right? This is all the testosterone pumping through their body in teenage years. It's normal, it's common. But when you give them puberty blockers, then it can't do what it needs to do in brain development. So you end up with people that struggle with maturity issues. That maturation didn't happen. So there will be older adults who didn't go through that maturation process. Now, life also matures you, right? So there's a sense in which after living life, they can grow up more and more in terms of their maturity. But they are missing that massive dose of testosterone during puberty. All right, let me talk about what happens when I take testosterone as a female. My voice is going to lower because it's going to take my vocal cords and it's going to stretch them. I'm going to have an increase in body hair and facial hair and muscle. Some girls, not all, some girls start to develop a receding hairline and even experience premature baldness from taking testosterone. So I remember seeing one young lady, late 20s, 26, 27, who's detransitioning, and you can see the receding hairline and the baldness that's already happening. There's going to be a reshifting of the fat on the body. A lot of people think that, oh, you know what? The bone structure changes on your face, and that's why you look male or female. No, it's actually not the bone structure. We have no evidence that testosterone or estrogen changes your skeletal structure at all. What it changes is where on your face the body puts the fat, okay? So the shifting of the fat on the face will make you look more masculine or more feminine. So when I take testosterone, it's going to shift where the fat is on my face and make me look more masculine. Same thing on the body. Women carry fat in their hips and thighs and all that. Well, it's going to start putting it in my belly, where men carry their fat. It's also going to, when I take testosterone, it'll affect my short-term memory, increase moodiness and irritability, increase my sweating, make me more aggressive. And there's some studies being done right now to see whether or not, what the impact is on the female reproductive system when you've been on testosterone for several years. And one of the ideas being looked at is the increased rate of cancer, ovarian cancer or uterine cancer, I think one of those. Endometrial cancer, that's it. I think it's uterine cancer and endometrial cancer, I think is what they're looking at to see what the effect is. And if so, they will need to do a full hysterectomy and remove all the female reproductive organs because it puts her at a higher risk of cancer. Okay, let me talk about estrogen on the guy. Estrogen is going to cause breast growth, called gynecomastia. It's going to cause a decrease in sweating, so their pores are going to get smaller. They're not going to sweat as much. They'll have an increase in body fat that's going to collect around the hips and thighs. It's going to change the look of their face. They're going to lose some of their muscle definition and their muscle strength. They're going to lose body hair. So while a girl's going to gain body hair in her legs and her arms and her chest and her face and all of that, the guy's actually going to lose the body hair. Now, if he's already grown a beard, it's not going to 100% go away, okay? Because of the fact that they would have to get like laser surgery to fully get it going, to fully remove it. The men are going to be at higher risk when they take estrogen of heart attacks, 5 times increased risk for thromboembolism. If you want to know what that is, talk to Dr. Bird over here. And risk of breast cancer will increase by 46 times. Many people don't realize that men can get breast cancer. They can, okay? It's just much less common in men than it is in women. When a man starts taking high doses of estrogen, it will increase their risk of breast cancer 46 times. So many of these changes, guys, are going to be irreversible. Once my beard starts to grow, it won't go back in. Even if I detransition, I will have to shave my face for the rest of my life. My lower voice, it will not change. Once it goes lower, it will stay lower for the rest of my life. The receding hairline, the baldness, when these things have started, I cannot reverse them. The body hair, the shifting of the fat, that's not going to go back when I stop taking these things. Similarly for the men, the changes that they've made, there is permanence in a lot of them. Okay, I'm going to say one more thing. This is going to be the heaviest thing I say and the most descriptive thing I say, but I do have to tell you this, okay? When young girls start, or even adults, start taking testosterone, it will cause their genitalia to grow. When men take estrogen, it will cause part of their genitalia to shrink. These are not reversible changes. And some of the girls talk about having a hard time fitting in girl jeans after they've transitioned and they detransition back because the girl jeans don't fit them the same anymore. Okay? I won't say anything heavier than that. That's as bad as I get. Okay? But you need to know that these are permanent changes that you can't reverse. And these are some of the things that people didn't know was going to happen to their body when they started taking this stuff. These are the things that they weren't aware of. And so you need to know what it's going to do. Obviously, when it comes to surgery, all I'm going to tell you is they're practicing on you guys. They're just practicing on you. They don't really know what they're doing. They are, the failures of surgery are real, okay? And the issues, the complications that come, people die from the surgeries. Some people will post their pictures on social media because they feel like nobody's listening to them. The doctor will talk to them, but once they have complications with surgery, the doctor all of a sudden doesn't want to talk to them that did the surgery. And they have all these complications afterwards. I want to introduce you to some detransitioners. Chloe Cole, sweet Chloe Cole, right here all the way on the left. She started puberty blockers and testosterone at 13. She had a double mastectomy, so both breasts removed at 15. And then she detransitioned at 16. She was autistic. Remember those golden four? Depression, anxiety, ADHD, autism? She was autistic. If you want to see, I know Jordan Peterson is a controversial figure. I'm not arguing for or against him. But if you do want to see a really good interview of Chloe Cole, Jordan Peterson sits down with her and he interviews her for 2 hours. And you will see Jordan Peterson, the therapist. And she's explaining kind of her childhood, what was going on. And he explains to her, let me tell you why you were feeling this way. Let me tell you what was going on in your mind. Let me tell you how the bullying you experienced was affecting you. It's a fascinating interview. And it gives you some really good perspective on what a good therapist would have done. I've met Chloe a couple years ago, and I said to her, I watched that interview with you and Jordan, and I wish you had him, when you're 11 years old. She says, I do too, because it would have changed everything. So that poor young girl has a double mastectomy, but she is very, very, very vocal against the trans movement. She'll sit before Congress. She travels around and speaks against what's happening with minors. Okay? I'm going to skip the middle. I'm going to go here, but then I'm going to come to the middle in a second. Well, maybe I'll just do her now. This is Sinead in the middle. Sinead Watson. She's the one I'm most concerned about of these three. Sinead puts her life on Twitter. She's from Scotland. She transitioned. She's got a lower voice. She had a double mastectomy. And she is so mentally unwell. There is times when she posts on Twitter that she's ready to end her life, and we're like encouraging her to stay alive. People around the world. Sinead, we love you. Don't do this. Blah, blah, blah. She has posted on Twitter before, if you find me dead, just know that transitioning did this to me. She has such regret. She is in such pain for what she did to her body. Recently, she found herself an American boyfriend, And it has really perked up her mood, and she's much happier, and I'm hoping things keep going in that trajectory because she is the one I'm the most concerned about. And then over here, you've got Richie, Tulip Richie, British man, male to female, back to male. He transitioned later in life, so maybe like late 20s or so, mentally unwell, was seeing therapists, was on estrogen, all these things, and the therapist said, look, you already passed as a woman, so there's really no reason for you to keep coming here. Either get the surgery or we're going to end you and your services. And he didn't want to lose the therapist, so he went and got bottom surgery. And I will spare you the details, but let's just say he has problems just using the bathroom, just everyday normal times using the bathroom. He speaks a lot against what's happening or what happens to his body. And one of the things he was, if I had more time, I would show you I actually show this whole Twitter thread from him. And one of the things he'll say on the very first part of that Twitter thread is, nobody told me what this was going to do to my body. And it breaks your heart when you hear their stories. With that said, God help us. Now we'll get to the Christian part of it all. Number one, we'll look at 4 different points. Number one, emotions, feelings, and truth. Part of what's happened in our culture, I don't need to tell you guys this, is our emotions and feelings have become our guidepost. They tell us what we should and shouldn't do, right? I live to fulfill my desires. That is what I desire to do. And so our emotions and our feelings become truth. But the problem is that there's times when our emotions and our feelings lie to us. So let's get back to these giant cockroaches they have in Atlanta, okay, in Georgia. First time I moved there, and I would see these things in my house, number one, this is when I would have the conversation with God that I've had a million times about why I need a husband, because that's his job, is to kill them things. I can't kill them, okay? So first of all, we have this repetitive conversation, Lord, this is what I need a man for. But the other thing is my body freaks out and panics. Okay, I'm getting hot, I'm shaking, I'm sweating. It's like, run for your life. It is going to kill you, is my body saying. It will eat you cell by cell in a slow and painful death. That is what my body's telling me, right? So I'm like, I'm freaking out. And I'm like, Alycia, I'm very rational. I'm very just thinking about things. I was a math person, all these kind of things. And I cannot get my body to calm down. I could not get it to calm down. Now I've got much better. 7 years in, I'm much calmer. I still scream, but at least I'm able to get it. I find now that if I can just take a container and put it on top of it, and I can slide something under it, and then I go and take it outside. So there we go. I've gotten better, but I had to figure out a system that worked. And they run they are fast. You have to chase them they're super fast. All that to say, I couldn't get my body to calm down. My feelings and my emotions were run for your life. But the reality is, guys, it wasn't going to destroy me. It really wasn't. But my body was telling me, everything in me was telling me I'm in danger for my life. And what was I trying to do in that moment, even though it wasn't successful in the beginning, was my thoughts, grabbing those thoughts and trying to make my brain calm the body down, to speak truth. You're not going to die. You're okay. You're not going to be tortured. And I'm trying to talk, using your brain to calm the emotions down and bring them back to reality and truth. Guys, there's times when these things that we feel, they are real, they are valid, but they don't always convey truth. And so just because I may feel like a boy doesn't mean I am. Just because I feel like I'm something else doesn't mean I am. If I said to you, well, I feel like I'm Korean. Oh, okay. Alycia, why do you feel like you're Korean? Well, because I like kimchi. I know how to say annyeonghaseyo, which is how they greet themselves. And I've been to South Korea. Therefore, I feel like I'm Korean. Now, a Korean person might look at me and be like, do you think that's all there is to being Korean? How do I know what it feels like to be Korean if I've never been Korean? How do I know what it feels like to be a boy if I've never been a boy? How do I know what it feels like to be a man if I've never been a man? And vice versa. So we need to be careful when we talk about these things and give validity to our feelings and our emotions that we shouldn't give them. Secondly, on this point, someone with gender dysphoria says, my biological body says I'm female, but I feel like a man. I relate to a man. I'm happier living as a man. And so what we say is our biological body is incorrect and should be ignored. It's not communicating a true reality. But the feelings is true. So all I need is to have the feelings and I can be a man, and I'm a man. That's all I need is to feel like a man. I'm a man. So my question is, if all you need is the feelings to tell you that you're a man and that makes you a man, all right, then why do you get the surgeries and take the hormones and do the puberty blockers and all these things? If the feeling is enough to make something true, then why do you do all those other things? The minute you start taking puberty blockers and testosterone and estrogen and all these things and get surgery, you are affirming that the physical body actually does convey a truth. You're saying the physical body actually does convey something about my masculinity or my femininity, but you ignored it on the front end and said it doesn't convey that, and then on the back end you said it does. Which way is it? You can't have it both ways. And people make that mistake all the time. So we need to not, internally in how they're thinking, they're not realizing that. And here's the thing, when somebody transitions, so I'm going to be a man, what I don't do is say, I want to get surgery and get cat ears and a cat tail. Why don't I do that? Because those are not biological characteristics of human males. So once I get the surgery and I take testosterone, I get facial hair and lower voice, I'm acknowledging the biological reality of maleness. That's why I don't ask for cat ears and cat tails. I ask for something that is biologically male. So is there a biological component to male and femaleness, or is there not? Like, which is it? Do you see how they're trying to have it both ways? And that's a contradiction that we can't rectify in any way. Secondly, what is a woman? What does it mean to be a woman? What I find so interesting is that people say, well, I want to be a woman, so I'm going to put on high heels, wear short skirts, tight-fitting clothes, grow my hair long, makeup, long fingernails, and I'm a woman. Now, there's a lot of ladies in here. None of you are dressed like that. Does it mean you're not a woman? How is it that that's a woman, but what women actually do is not womanhood? Why is it that nobody says, hey, I want to be a woman, so I want to study math? Because women do that too. Or I want to be a woman, so I'm going to cook. Why is it that we say, I want to become this overly sexualized version of a woman? And this is what the feminists have an issue with. Because the feminists spend a lot of years, whether you love them or hate them, saying that women are more than just sexual objects. They're more than just their physical things. And then the trans community comes along and says, yep, no, all I got to do to be you is put on some heels, wear tight dresses, short dresses, and nails and makeup, because that's all there is to being a woman. And they just undid years of feminism that said you are more than just sexual objects. And they just reaffirm that all there is to a woman is how she looks. But there's no substance. There's nothing more there. Point 3, being male and female is good. There's a lot of cool differences between men and women, and Dr. Berg could tell you probably way more than I can, but I'm going to give you just a few that I think are pretty cool. Women have an extra layer of fat under their skin, which is why their skin is smoother. Women have better muscle endurance than men. They have bigger memory centers than men. They function better during sleep deprivation, which helps with all of those midnight nursings and things like that they have to do in the middle of the night. They can actually function better with less sleep than men can. They also have better senses of smell and taste, which is interesting when you think about who would you want to cook? The one that has a better sense of smell and taste and more taste buds, which is what women are, which is interesting. Although I will say I worked in restaurants, and all the head chefs in the restaurants I worked in, these like nice upscale restaurants in Philly, they were all men. All the assistant chefs, what you call the sous chefs, were all men. And the desserts, the dessert chefs were women, which is interesting. But when it comes to fancy restaurants, a lot of the chefs are actually men. Men have more muscle mass than women. No surprise there. Those muscles are faster and more powerful. They have more blood cells than women per microliter. This is not going to come to a shocker to any of us ladies, but men are less sensitive to cold temperatures. That's why we walk around in like jackets and hats and scarves and bundled, and the guys walk around in t-shirts and shorts. We're like, yeah, it feels great in here. I'm like, no, it's freezing. It is freezing. That's why I look like this, right? Men are more likely to be colorblind. Any colorblind men in here? Okay. So men are more likely to be colorblind than women, but they sense movement better than women do. I've also heard, and I don't know if this is true, I'll let you husbands and wives fight this one out later on, but I've heard when a baby cries in the middle of the night, the mother reacts instantly. The father can sleep through that. But let there be some noise in the house and the father wakes up before the wife. I've also heard that too. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that our senses kind of pick up different things. And finally, it's almost as if, and God knew that in 2025 we would struggle to know whether or not we were male or female. So he said, maybe I need to help my creation out. So he could put the answer in Revelation, or he could put it in the very first chapter of the very first book of the Bible. And this is what it says in Genesis 1:27. You guys know this verse well. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. When it talks about male and female, he created them, the Hebrew word there for create means to shape or to form. In other words, they are shaped or formed male or female. Guys, it's a biological, physical description. It is not a description of a feeling. It is not a description of what sports you play. It is a biological, physical description. In other words, you are biologically shaped or physically shaped male, physically shaped female. That's what it says. So to give clarity to us from the beginning, it is right there. Dr. Paul Brand is a medical doctor, as I wind this down, and then I'm going to give you guys time for questions. Dr. Paul Brand was a medical doctor in India. He wrote a great book by my favorite author, Philip Yancey, called In His Image, in the Likeness of God in His Image, something like that. And he shares his experience working as a Christian leprosy doctor in India. He saw many people die over the years from leprosy. And he had the opportunity to study the skeletons of people who died from leprosy. And one of the things, he observed some of the things. I want to read you some of the things that he observed. He says the size of the pelvis tells you whether or not it's male or female. If the pelvis is shallow and broad with an inner ring that's smooth, it belongs to a woman. A man's pelvis is more narrow. It's heart-shaped and it's formed with heavier bones. The woman's pelvis has a unique oval opening which matches the size and shape of a baby's head. So just from looking at the bones, Dr. Brand can tell a lot. But then he goes on to add a very, very interesting point, and this is what he says. He says the female runner still lags behind the male, and blame rests on the pelvis. The projections on the man's pelvis allow for more powerful muscles, but a woman equipped with them could not bear a child. Similarly, a man's hip sockets are closer together, near the center of gravity, which enables more efficient movement. If a woman's were similarly designed, there'd be no room for the baby's head to extrude. So the odd pelvic bone represents a summation of many different requirements. When a woman wishes she could run faster or sway less or have a narrower base, let her know the survival of the human race depends upon her being just the shape she is. Guys, there is an intentionality behind your design, and the way that you are shaped and formed and created. And it can be really hard for us to like ourselves in a world that never makes it easy to like oneself. You're never wearing the right clothes. Your hair, the style is constantly changing for the hair and the clothes. You don't have this thing right. You don't have that thing right. It makes it so hard to be satisfied with who we are. But yet Stacey Eldridge once posted on Facebook, she said, it breaks my heart when women look at the sky and think, wow, God is amazing. But look in the mirror and say, oh, as if he did not make both. People always ask me, what do you do if you're struggling with gender dysphoria? Or if you know somebody that's struggling with gender dysphoria? Or if you're a parent of somebody struggling with gender dysphoria? Number one, get the people off social media. Get them off social media. You might need to change their friend groups, and you might even need to change their schools. Okay? There has been some interesting stuff, and I've seen this firsthand, where a young lady I know who was a high school student all of a sudden started saying she thinks she was a boy. Her mother said, oh, really? Took her out of school and put her on public school and put her on online school. She doesn't feel like she's a boy anymore. She feels completely fine. Because it's a social contagion, changing their peer group, the friend group, their environment actually brings about drastic changes. Now, that is easier for me to stand here and say than it is for you to do. That is hard because you're going to tell your 16-year-old that you're going to put them in homeschool if they're in public school. You're going to take away their social media. These are not easy things. Parenting right now is just at a whole nother level. It is so difficult, and the challenges that parents face are so incredibly difficult. Also, in addition to those three things, please help them to get counseling for mental health. Get counseling for mental health, not for gender dysphoria. Help them to get counseling for whatever the depression is, the anxiety, the ADHD, or the autism. And please, as much as you can beg and plead, do not let them get on puberty blockers or testosterone or estrogen or have any surgery because those things are permanent. Name changes we can fix. Clothes changes we can fix. He, him pronouns and she, her pronouns we can fix. We cannot bring things back that have already been taken away due to these other things. Please fight for any way you can to make sure they don't put on and get into any of these permanent medications, because then we can't reverse things for sure. And finally, and then I'll turn it over to you guys for Q&A. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And growing up in the 80s and 90s, this was kind of the rise of the LGB, lesbian, gay, bi community. I remember when I was a kid, this kid named Ryan White, who got HIV from a blood transfusion. And I remember when he died as a kid and being sad that this kid died. The people in the LGBT community were getting AIDS and were dying of AIDS. And I'm sitting in the church, and I watched people from the stage mock them, criticize them, talk horrible about these filthy people. And I remember being so humiliated and shamed and embarrassed as a Christian teenager sitting there watching what was being said about the LGBT community. And I remember thinking to myself at that time, how would Jesus have talked to them? Because these are people who are lost. These are people who are hurting. They are dying of sicknesses. And the story that kept coming to my mind as a teenager was the woman who was caught in the act of adultery. Now, we know there's a lot of question whether or not it was in the text and blah, 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 blah. I personally think it was because it's completely consistent with the character of Jesus. But this story, these righteous Pharisees who did everything right. They fasted, they kept the law, they gave their money to the poor. I mean, they were really good people. They brought this sinner to Jesus. Interesting, they only brought her, not the man, as well, but you know. She should be stoned. It's not exactly what the Old Testament says. It says they both should be stoned, but okay. And this woman who's caught in her sin, that's been brought into the public eye, the humiliation, the shame that she feels standing before the being that actually was good. And what does Jesus do? Does he jump on with the Pharisee and say, that's right, why would you do that? What's wrong with you? Why would you think this is good for your body? Why would you think this was good for your soul? Why would you think this is good for your mental health? Why would you think blah, 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 blah? Does he do all that? No, he challenged the Pharisees in their righteousness. Well, good. Well, since you're so good, please be the first to carry out the capital punishment. Because this wasn't the only thing in the Old Testament that called on death. So did lying. So the Old Testament had really clear consequences for sin, and they oftentimes resulted in death. But Jesus comes, and there's a new covenant under Jesus. And under this covenant, he will become the final lamb sacrificed for the sins of the world. And so this sin that required a death in the Old Testament, under the new covenant, he doesn't stone her. And we start to see a shift in how we respond to the sinner. What warranted death doesn't get it now. And he essentially takes those Pharisees and makes them realize that maybe they're not quite as good as they thought they were. Because none of them could pick up that stone and do it honorably and stone her, because they realized they too deserved it. So essentially what Jesus does is he protects her. He covers her from the people that humiliated her, that shamed her. He protects her from them. And he doesn't say, hey, there's no big deal that you did this. Once they leave, he tells her, don't do this again, but I don't condemn you. Don't do this again. He's not going to affirm it. It is still sin. But I'm not going to condemn you here. And I'm most certainly not going to kill you. And when I was a teenager, when I would think of what was happening in the church with the LGBT community, Christians saying, well, I'm not going near them because I don't want that spirit to jump on me. I get that, but I'm going into prisons with murderers, and people think I'm doing the work of God. But you don't want to have a friend who's gay? And all I could see was, instead of that woman at the feet of Jesus, I just saw the gay community down there. And I just saw them with the Pharisees pointing at them. You filthy, you dirty people. Look at what you did. Let's kill him. Let's get him, Jesus. And him saying, not today. I'm going to cover them. I'm going to protect them. But the thing is, guys, those Pharisees were going to remember what Jesus did. They are going to remember that he humiliated them, and they will get him one day. And one day somebody will die for that sin, but it won't be her. I would love for us as a church to be different this time. I would love for us as a church to see the trans community, the LGBT community, whoever, put whoever you want, including you, down there with Jesus. Where your junk was brought out into the public and you're standing before the righteous God and all you can sense is your filth. And I would love for us to be a church that takes the side of Jesus and not the side of the Pharisee. That says, man, you are still valuable in your sin as a human being created in the image of God, so valuable that I'm willing to die for you. As opposed to saying, you filth. Because the reality is, guys, it was never the Pharisees versus the woman. It was the Pharisees and the women versus Jesus. We all are down there, and compared to his perfect standard, we all fall short. And we all need his protection and his death so that we don't die for our sins. So let us be different this time around, friends. You can see the brokenness and the hurt that they're going through. And while it can be so frustrating at times because we see things through spiritual eyes, understand that these are hurting, broken people who are looking for a solution to their pain of mental illness, their pain of not liking themselves. They're told the solution is to transition, only to find out, possibly, that that wasn't the solution. And with the reason why people are detransitioning, because they realize after 7-8 years of transitioning, they still are mentally unwell. They picked the wrong solution, and then they look down at their bodies and think, what have I done? And that devastation. The world, the secular culture, is the one fighting back. They are pushing at them. The LGB is pushing against them. There's a website called Gays Against Groomers who is staunchly against the medicalization of children. They go into school board meetings and they challenge these school boards as gay men who are married and say, why are you putting this stuff in front of children? Why are they reading these books? Why are we transitioning children? The gay community is fighting back. The secular culture is fighting back because they're tired of men and women's sports and all these things and taking over scholarships and all this stuff. The secular culture is already fighting back. So when the trans community gets kicked out of there, well, they know that they can find a home with us in their broken, mutilated bodies. That we will still see that there is a value to them. That they are still valuable, worth Jesus dying for. We don't affirm it. We don't affirm it. But Jesus died for us when we were sinners. He only dies for sinners. That includes us. And let's be that hands and feet to these people that are lost. Okay? Thank you, guys. I know that was super heavy. I appreciate your attention. I want to go ahead and give you guys time for Q&A. It could be on anything. I talked about anything. I didn't talk about whatever. And I turn it over to you. In the back.
Okay, 2 questions. What are your thoughts on Christian counselors who counsel people for these mental health issues that you've listed, along with the other issues? What are your thoughts on that? And then also, how can we fight this propagation of these ideas in the marketplace? Is there a resource that we can look at and say, oh, these people are supporting this? No, we're not going to support it with our money. So, because so much of this is just follow the money. They're making money off it, and they don't care. It's just the bottom line. So those 2 questions.
Well, let me start with that one first. You guys remember this whole Target debacle a couple years back when they started making bathing suits for like trans people or something, or it was like for both male and female or something like that. Do you guys remember any of that? Yep. And people completely boycotted Target. Their stock tanked. And so what happened is Target took all that stuff and they moved it to the back of the store. Money talks, right? Which is what you're getting at, my friend. You know, it's really hard, right? Because the way that because we're a global economy, like the way that we spend money, it just mixes in with everything. So it's really hard to make statements like, okay, I won't spend with this thing, or I won't buy this brand, I won't buy this brand. Bud Light went through it too. The number 1 beer in America for 3 generations. Bud Light, they put a guy named Dylan Mulvaney on the front. Dylan is a trans woman. And they put him on the front of a Bud Light can. People were livid. Bud Light, the sales of Bud Light tanked. It was their marketing person that thought this was a good idea. She is no longer there. Bud Light tanked. Grocery stores could not sell Bud Light. They priced it cheaper than water, and they could not get it off the shelves. People spoke. Now, the same people who boycotted Target may have come back. Maybe they boycotted for like a month or so Target got the message, and then they go back, which I think is actually okay. Like, I don't think you need to penalize them forever. I don't think that's helpful, because then they just get angry with us, and they tune us out, right? But they did it long enough to make the statement, to make their sales drop, and to get their attention, so they made the change. And then people have gone back, and I don't know what happened to Bud Light. Negra Modelo surpassed it, and I think it's still number 1. So Bud Light lost its title. All that to say, it's hard, because all of this stuff, we are so interwoven that it can be really hard. So how can we, maybe speak up, or, I would say, again, the culture is doing a lot of the speaking up. Let them continue to do it. I want, my hope is that I can at least educate you so that people that you know that are going through this, you can better guide them, advise them, understand them, what's happening. But I do think, if there's a school board meeting, for example, and they want to vote on letting trans people in sports, that's one way to speak up. Going and voting there, protecting women's sports. If they say, well, we want to take a vote about having mixed bathrooms, that's a good place to go and say, hey, I don't want to have mixed bathrooms in my community for our children. So there's ways that you can speak out, but what I don't advise doing is let's all get on social media and make sure everybody knows where we stand on this issue. Okay? Guys, the reality is most people in the trans community know what you think already. Same thing with the homosexuality question. They know Christians don't support it. Okay? They don't need you to tell it over and over and over again. Okay? So I don't think that's helpful. In regards to the therapist, Christian therapist, yes, I like the idea of a Christian therapist, and I want to make sure that we are getting therapists, though Christian or not, that are actually more than just that actually have the right degrees to be able to counsel, okay? So that would be my only thing, making sure that they have the degrees that are needed to actually best advise. And Christian counselors hopefully would not steer somebody down that gender pathway, but instead would give them ways to deal with whatever depression, whatever mental health issues are there. So I'm totally for the Christian counseling, and really any, because there's a lot of non-Christian counselors who finally feel free to actually do proper therapy and not be forced to encourage transitioning. So that would be my thought. Does that answer both of your questions? Okay, thank you, friend.
I would just, answered kind of what I was going to say, is that the mental health of these young people is, it's interesting as you look over the years, though, it's just always changed. That whatever is popular in the culture is what all these kids or young people all seem to have all at once. Like transgender wasn't a thing back 30 years ago. Now everybody's transgender.
That's the
20
social
years ago,
contagion.
everybody was all at once gay or lesbian after
Right.
I Kissed a Girl came out by Katy Perry. And then, and now it's just like, in that group of parents, the biggest thing I think with a lot of the parents is it's cool for your kid. You're cooler as a parent if your child is transgender or has some kind of learning disability or has something else. And so these parents, as I have a brother that's in the city and stuff, these yuppie parents are all finding the pride of that my kids got. They're all bragging about how open-minded they are and all these other things. And their kids are all getting pulled into this, like you'd said earlier, of, that they're open to this. And I'm proud that, I'm open to my kid being a boy or a girl, whatever they decide they want to be. And this is poisoning these children's minds early on to adopt these things.
Yeah, sure, friend. So this is my thoughts on some of this, okay? I can't say that every historian would agree with me. But because of America's rough past when it comes to equality with black people and even women's rights, there is an overcorrection now that we don't want to be that again, okay? So we don't want to fall into the same mistakes again where we are anti-somebody. And so what happens is we become then overcorrect to being, I'm going to accept everybody. Does that make sense? So it's like we're just so scared to fall into the mistakes of the past that we want to be so accepting of everything. And so what happens is instead of saying, okay, look, these were mistakes of the past, but how can we make sure that, we make women and people of color to feel accepted? We send kind of overcorrect and say, well, everything is okay. And that's where we messed up, is in this overcorrection. Okay? And so that's where you get these parents that, I'm so proud and so open-minded. I accept everybody. I love everybody. Love is love and all these kind of things. And that's where we've kind of gone too far. So yes, absolutely, I would agree that there are some serious problems with that way of thinking as a parent. Hi, friend.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I have a guy who is my kid's age, so he's probably early 40s. And we've known him forever. Okay, so he has known that he's gay for ages. Well, he's now married, has a husband, and I know his parents, they live here in town. And even this guy comes over when my daughter is home to visit us. He loves us and everything. Well, he's been writing me a lot about the Bible and about prayer and what version do you like? And my mom's going to get me a Bible, and she wants to get me the NIV. Is that okay?
Oh, wow.
And anyway, he says he was going to bring these donuts to he works for George Soros, okay? And he was going to bring these donuts to the board meeting, and it said, Jesus is my king. And I said, oh, that's great. I said, will everybody be accepting of your kind gesture? And he said, well, probably most people. And he said, there's a group of us that pray before board meetings.
Wow.
Well, I don't think this guy is really a Christian, and I don't want to really tell him, or should I, that his lifestyle is wrong. I think that should come from someone else, because he's being so open, and I don't want to shut him down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love that he's coming to you and talking to you.
Oh, my gosh, so often. I don't really want to, I don't think I should be the one.
So, I think sometimes this is the struggle, right? Because it's hard to blanket rule things. Because there are times we do need to tell people because of what they're doing, and there's times when we need to not. And I really think it's situational. So it sounds to me like this man is drawing closer to Jesus already. And if he is doing that, then that is what my focus is going to be, is encouraging him to go down that lane. And the reason is because the Holy Spirit works in us to will and do for his good pleasure. If he becomes a Christian fully, which it seems like he's trying, and he's trying to work towards that, then the Holy Spirit will deal with his sin. He will. Don't take that burden on you to be the Holy Spirit. He doesn't need your help. He's good at his job. There are other times, though, where it might be appropriate to say, okay? But because of this particular situation where it seems like he's already drawing and going in that direction, then let the Lord keep working, because sometimes we feel like we need to change the person to live like Jesus before they like Jesus. Okay? Don't do that. That makes them resent him. Come to him first, and he helps us to live more like him. We do that with him because it's too hard for us to change ourselves. We need his help. There's a story of a woman, Lexi and maybe Nick. This is what happens when you cross like 35. You don't remember anything. So I think it's Lexi and Nate. They're on YouTube. They share their story. It might make a little people uncomfortable. Okay? He is a gay man. She was a trans man. Born female, transitioned to man. So now he's a gay man married to a man. So they get married. They're in church. They're singing. They're leading Bible study. About 3 years into their marriage, she gets a double mastectomy to finish her transition being a man, or to continue it on. Several months after that, the Lord says to Lexi, "It's time for you to give me your gender." And she's like, "What? Like I just got this double mastectomy. What do you mean give you your gender? It's time for you to give me your gender." And she begins the process of detransitioning in obedience to the Lord. Why did he wait that many years, my friend, before he pulled her out of that? I don't know, but one possibility is, had he done it in the beginning, she didn't have that relationship with him to the point where she was really, really willing to surrender everything. But over the course of time, as her relationship with him deepened, she got to the point where she could give him whatever he asked for, and he asked for it. And they share their story of her detransition back to a female, and their testimony. She now has 2 kids. Obviously, she can't nurse, and that grieves her. But she's been able to have children, and they are an amazing Christian couple. But the Lord walked them through that process. We oftentimes want to change that first, and I get that because I have those tendencies. I just have seen how the Lord works, and it seems like his agenda is different than ours. And what he's most concerned about in the beginning is their relationship with him. Because even if I took a man who was gay and I made him straight, he's still going to hell. He's just going to hell straight instead of gay. I didn't do anything. I brought him no closer to Jesus. If we make that our focus, we're not letting the Holy Spirit do his thing on his timing. So I would say, to me, it sounds like in that situation, the Lord is already working. You can let him work. And your job is to continue to help him to grow. Do more Bible studies. Pray with him. Talk to him about the Bible. Just grow that. And the Holy Spirit will work at the right time. Okay? Thank you, friend.
Sort of 2 related questions.
Okay.
I've seen an increase, at least in my generation, of people self-reporting mental health issues. Like they'll say, "I'm depressed," without that coming necessarily with a clinical diagnosis. Is when you reference the 4 different
Depression,
things,
anxiety,
were those clinical or were those self-reported by the person that was going through the process?
That's a good question. I don't remember, but I doubt it was self-reported. And the reason is because a lot of people are already on meds. Okay? So when I read about them, you already read stories of people on meds for various things. Obviously, not necessarily for autism, but for ADHD and the depression, they're already on those things, and they already. Now, some of it definitely could be, part of it is, we confuse sadness and grief with depression sometimes. Like if somebody dies, it's okay to be sad for a period of time and to grieve and to cry. That's normal. That's not depression. That's getting back to your self-diagnosis, right? And they're misdiagnosing themselves.
And then also, I know that social media does play a large part into that, but is there a change that's going on that might not be explained by the rise in social media use as well? Like, is this generation actually going through something different, or are they manufacturing their own sort of issues, if that makes sense?
Well, I feel like it's almost like the gentleman in the back said. It's like every era has their things. When I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was anorexia. right? People are struggling with anorexia, they're struggling with bulimia, which is also a social contagion, by the way. I'm going to spare you, but there are websites out there that encourage girls who are already skinny to keep starving themselves. It's horrible. But they say, you look amazing, keep it up, you're doing so good, you're so beautiful. And the girls are generally saying it because they're struggling too. So there is an aspect in which, kind of like he was saying, there are these kind of like influences and contagions and things that are veering young people in one direction or the next. It seems like this is the thing for now. It is changing somewhat. Social media, mental health, all of these things are playing a part. So as we pull back on some of the social media usage on young people, as we pull back on even having schools or phones in schools, which some places are, that's going to be able to help actually some of this stuff. And then we'll just see what the next thing is, right? Whatever the next thing might be, it's going to keep coming up. So Jonathan Haidt has done, with his research on the effect of social media on young people, he's been instrumental in helping these things for helping cell phones to come out of schools, which is good.
Hi, I am a Christian counselor, so I appreciate
Great.
you not throwing us under the bus entirely.
No.
But I think you did a great job addressing the hopelessness and helplessness that goes into suicidal ideation,
Yep.
and also the unrealistic life expectations
Mm-hmm.
that are at the root issue. I'm wondering, I have some ideas, but what are some of your ideas on increasing that psychological flexibility of someone who is so severely depressed?
Mm-hmm.
Because you mentioned that perspective needs to be on, eternity, Jesus, but sometimes when somebody is so low, they have trouble
Absolutely.
hearing that.
No, and that's where you guys are really going to come into play, right? Which is why I would never tell anybody, never go to therapy. One of the interesting things, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, actually, because I definitely think, I spent 5 years in therapy, so I'm definitely not anti-therapy. But one of the things that's coming out, and you can share your thoughts, is there are some questions as to whether or not we are keeping people in therapy too long. Meaning, instead of, you want to help somebody get over the situation. So let me give you an example. A young girl came to me, 17 years old, and explained to me that she was mentally unwell because when she was about 5, she was at church playing, and the fire alarm went off. So she was brought outside with the other kids, but it took her mother 30 minutes to get to her. And that really upset her, that her mother took 30 minutes to get to her, okay? I'm just using this as an example. So there's a book called Bad Therapy by Abigail Schreier. And one of the things that she addresses is, let's spend 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months in therapy dealing with that. But then let's also say, okay, now how are we going to go forward? Because one of the things that she's saying is that the rumination and going over and over actually makes it so that you actually can't overcome whatever it is. And since we can't fix the past, constantly talking, dwelling on it, is actually making things worse. So one of the things that she proposes is actually making it shorter, okay? So helping somebody get through it and say, okay, we've processed it, we've talked about it, we've dealt with all the feelings of abandonment or neglect or whatever it might be, but now how do we then go forward and live? So in other words, the way I'm answering questions is by saying, I've been reading some stuff that says maybe we need to tweak how we do therapy. So we're not keeping people in therapy for 5 years to talk about the same situation because we're not helping them get over it. There is definitely examples of very severe depression, and only you would have caught the hopelessness and hopelessness that I was tying into suicidal ideation. I avoid adding that piece in just because I never know where an audience is, but you're right. That's why I throw that in there in case anybody's dealing with that. And so I guess I'm saying I definitely think that there's people who do need some deep counseling. I think part of why I'm saying trying to deal with the realistic negativeness of life is partially getting back to what my friend here over here said, where some people are diagnosing themselves with depression. Really, it was something sad that happened. And there's some of that kind of like, what you're going through is not what some of the severe depression is actually about. And I was just with a guy, a Christian man, earlier this week, who suffers from severe depression. He suffers from seasonal depression. And so he's got a light that helps him. He loves the Lord, but this is his struggle. Gives him insomnia. He wakes up in the middle of the night and just can't sleep. He's been struggling with this for pretty much most of his life. And he's in probably his early 60s, late 50s, okay? So there's absolutely situations where that is something where, yes, either counseling or maybe like in his situation, the light, that sunlight, fake sunlight, for 2 hours a day does wonders for him. So yeah, so I guess I'm kind of sort of answering it, acknowledging that there is cases in which it really does, but I would love your thoughts too, to hear about, as someone who does therapy and does counseling, do you think that there are changes? Would you agree with Abigail Schreier that there are some, we should consider maybe how we do therapy and changing up the format in some degree? Do you think any of that, so now I guess I'm asking you a question. How about that? Do you think any of that is something that you see or would be helpful in what you do?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person. Some people do just need that person to listen to them.
Yep.
That's where I think where you also kind of hit the nail on the head of, using Jesus as an example. God was with him in his pain and suffering
Yep.
when he was praying before he went to the cross.
Yep.
Sometimes we just have to be willing to sit with people
Yep.
in their suffering until they are willing to hear,
Exactly.
just a little bit of shift in their thinking. And so,
Yeah.
but to answer your question, yeah, I think there are bad ways of doing therapy, and it should be really goal directed. You should have goals, you should be working to achieve those, and really the ultimate purpose is so you can give that person tools to then deal with life circumstances on their own. Point them to maybe friends in their life or their local church.
I like it.
Or they reach out to people in their own community.
I like it. That's helpful. Yeah, thank you for sharing your perspective on that, because that's one source, but it's helpful for me to hear as well from other therapists. I agree with the goal kind of directive. Where are we going? We're not just going to sit here and just talk about this for 5 years. Where are we going that we can help give you the proper tools that you can then move on in life? Great. Thank you, friend.
Can I get your number before we go?
Yes, you should.
You had brought up earlier that certain depression, anxiety, autism, and one other
ADHD.
were there before the desire to trace it. So I've heard at least 3 or 4 times from professionals, folks out in the field, that the desire to become somebody else stemmed from the pain of that depression, that those were actually contributing to the fact that they needed to change. They will use that argument to convince somebody that they need to change their gender to get rid of the depression. Do you have resources that, or can you elaborate more on how somebody like me or any of us here can debate that with a professional or just the average person? And where can we go to find out more information about it?
I'm going to see if I can pull up my longer version, because in that one, so, and I would say that there's an aspect of that is true, right? This is why you will find it in most of the situations that somebody is struggling from some sort of mental health condition first, but not every, okay? So it's going to be the majority, but not every. Let me see where did I find this? Got to go back to different years and different versions of it, because I change it. Bummer. Where is this line? Oh, there it is. Okay. This is from the American Urological Association, okay? What they did is they looked at psychiatric encounters before and after gender-affirming surgery, okay? This is one particular study. There's going to be other ones, okay? And I'm not really sure why the American Urological Association did it, maybe because it deals with the bottom surgeries, and that's probably why they did it. Either way, so the one on the left is men trying to become women. The one on the right is women trying to become men, okay? Their psychiatric encounters before surgery only were 74 for the men becoming women. 81 people had psychiatric encounters after surgery. And then 38 had psychiatric encounters, both before and after surgery. Okay? The women one is 36 before, actually less psychiatric encounters after surgery, and then 13 had it before and after. If you go to the bottom, it talks about suicide. Okay? Before surgery only, or suicide attempts were 38 for the men, 6 for the women. Before surgery, there were 9 suicide attempts. After surgery, there were 25 for the men. 4 before and after the surgery, both suicide before and both suicide attempts afterwards. The women, you didn't see the changes. Before surgery, 3, after surgery, 3, and none that were in both before and after. So my short answer is, there are studies that are going to show that psychiatric health does get better for some, and it doesn't get better for others. So you're going to kind of have the range of both. But what I would say is that it's generally, though, that the mental health conditions are first. And you'll find more studies pointing to the mental health conditions before that than because think about it. In this era, if you want to transition, you can transition. So not being able to transition leading to mental health isn't really a factor right now, because you can transition if you want. So you can't say, well, you're not letting me transition, and that's what's fueling my depression. No, you can transition if you want. In this country, you can. So that's not really happening. What's happening, actually, is the transitioning is seen as a solution to the pain. It's seen as a solution to the mental health, and this is how they're dealing with it. That's what it is. Okay? Does that help, or am I missing some still? Oh. Right. You want to know, how do you express it? You don't need to go that far through all the way to transitioning. So what you do... But you know what I would actually do, though? I wouldn't even argue debate with somebody whether it has to go that far. I would just say, have you ever gotten counseling for your depression? Let's just start there. That's what I would encourage. To get counseling for whatever the mental health conditions are. Don't even debate, and you can say, because what if transitioning actually doesn't make you happier? Or what if it's not the solution? So let's get in front of a counselor, certainly somebody like her, who's not going to try and transition you, and see if we can help people get to the root of what's going on. Your discomfort with yourself, the sadness, whatever you're feeling, your anxiety, why you feel you're awkward or whatever, you don't fit in. Let's see if we can get to the root of that. That's actually more what I would encourage people. And so don't feel like you have to debate them to show them that that's not the solution. I would throw it out there. That there's people, because the reason why I want you to focus on your counseling is because there's people who transitioned and it really didn't help them. And I don't want that to be your story. You could say it like that. Yeah, tell me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Of course they are. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Yeah, absolutely. So I would just ask them, tell me what studies you've found that says that. Ask them to show it, because you can just, if you want to, I like PubMed because that's the medical publication. Yep. And if you look on there, you can find studies that show that transitioning does not actually, not letting somebody in transition doesn't lead to suicide. So I believe I saw something on there that may have talked about that. I just can't think anymore, because I've read so much stuff that I don't know what I've seen where. Sorry, you're just going to watch me scroll through. I'm just trying to see if I have anything on to give you a particular link. So there is suicide by clinic-referred transgender adolescents in the UK. That's NCBI, NLM, and National Institute of Health. So it's called suicide by clinic-referred transgender adolescents in the UK. That's going to probably talk about Tavistock, what I mentioned to you, and the death rates there. of those 4. And I think that's probably the one that I looked at. But start there. Yep, and it'll give you links, exactly. It'll give you links to other ones, yeah.
There's a study from Finland that also shows that the idea is so popular that if you don't allow someone to transition, they're less likely to commit suicide just taking the act.
And you can use the fact that that reason why Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, all these people pulled back, it's not working, right? Canada's digging in their heels, and the U.S. is changing. We're the two. I don't know where Australia is at, but Canada is not budging. The U.S. is changing. Hi, friend.
Hi. So you talked about being a friend to the gay people in our lives and, protecting them like against bullying and stuff. How can we do that without conveying the message that we support their decision? And does that even matter?
Right. So once again, the challenge is I never want them to think I affirm them, right? And how do I make sure they know that I don't affirm them? So I hear you. It's a tough position to be in. I think they might have an idea. I don't know your relationship with this person. They might have an idea because of your Christianity, of where you stand. Also, if they ask you, you can let them know. That's definitely where you want to tell them you stand. If they ask, you tell them. And the consequences may be what they may be. But you don't want to shy away from saying, this is what I believe and this is why. But you are affirming the value of the person, but saying Christianity pulls apart the actions from your worth. Okay? So you want to make that distinction. Okay? You are not defined all by your actions and that kind of thing. So you want to pull those two apart because people see them as one. Okay? This is why I am gay. Like that is who I am. It's my whole entity. And that's why when you say, I disagree with your homosexuality, they hear you disagree with my existence. Okay? So you want to pull apart those two. There's what you do and who you like, which isn't really all that big of a deal. What's more important is that, your value, blah, 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 those kind of things. But I don't know. I guess I don't necessarily always feel that I need to tell somebody what I think of them. Because I just kind of feel like I'm supposed to let my light shine before men, that they will see my good works and glorify my Father's in heaven. And I kind of have that be what I lead with. And should the situation arise, because honestly, if they know you're a Christian, they're already probably wondering. And you're talking about why you believe the Bible, and the Bible's so true and it's so helpful. So just as you talk about your life, they're probably going to feel, she seems to really follow this Bible. She seems to take it pretty seriously. She may or may not be okay with it, but at least they'll have a history of you loving them when they don't know. And so that when you do tell them, it's like, okay, but you've accepted me so much as like your friend. And hopefully that will speak to them, make them not pull away. But it's hard, especially for parents, man. I just feel for a lot of these parents that the kids turn their backs on them, which is so wrong. So thank you for asking that. It's a good question.
One thing that you didn't mention that some people may be wondering about is that when people argue that gender is not a binary but a spectrum, they'll often refer to the intersex as support for that belief. Yeah. Can you take a second to kind of tell people how they would respond to that?
Oh, you guys interested in hearing intersex real quick? Yes? Okay. All right. Well, then I'll tell you really quickly. Very quickly, you tell me first. What do you think? I just want to hear, because it helps me to know what people are thinking when they ask this question. What do you think somebody who's intersex is? Both sexes. Great. Okay, medical condition. You're pretty close there, young man. Well done. Okay, right? So yes, okay. Really quickly. Generally, the way that we understand male or females are XX, males are XY. Okay? That's true most of the time for mammals, okay, of which humans are. Platypuses are 5X and 5Y, so they actually even function a little bit different. And there are cases where you can be XX in male and XY in female. Okay, I'll get to that in a second. So from a biological perspective, let's just step back and look at just biology and all of life as a whole. When biologists want to determine if something is male or female, they can use the chromosomes, but the XX and Y become problematic once you leave mammals. Because when you go to birds, a female bird is ZW and a male bird is ZZ. So how do you use X's and Y's to determine whether or not something is male or female in that situation? So you can't use it. The XXXY standard doesn't cross species. With reptiles, it's the temperature that the egg incubates. And certain reptiles, if it incubates warmer, it's female. If it incubates colder, it's male. And for other reptiles, it's the reverse of that. Warmer's male, cooler's female. So when biologists want, and scientists want a consistent study across species to determine male or female, what they do is they go another level deeper than your chromosomes, and they look at what's called your gametes, okay? Are you an egg producer or sperm producer? That's it. Egg producers are females, sperm producers are male. Regardless of your chromosomal makeup, you're either an egg producer or a sperm producer. There are some exceptions. Certain types of worms, barnacles, snails, and slugs, none of which are you, okay? They actually have both male, and they are both what's called true hermaphrodites. They are both male and female, okay? But there is no situation at all in human beings where somebody has both egg and sperm. Not a single one, okay? What happens with intersex is, and usually I draw this all out, so I'm going to try and do this with words because it's much easier when I draw it and you can see and you can kind of follow along with me, is there's a million things. When you study embryology, there's a million things that have to go right on the micro level for you to form male or female, okay? Let alone all the things that to form in your brain exactly right, or in your ears exactly right, or in your eyes exactly. I mean, he can tell you. I mean, human development is remarkable. It is truly remarkable, the things that have to happen on a micro level. So all that to say, what can happen in certain types of individuals is something doesn't go as it typically should, okay? So let me see if I can give you an example. Oh boy, what's the easiest one to do without? Okay, there's something called Klinefelter syndrome, which is when somebody is born XXY. So are they male or female, guys? I like that you don't have an answer. It means you were listening. Okay, let me tell you a little bit more about this person with Klinefelter. Klinefelter, because of the extra X chromosome, let me actually, because I don't want to cite them wrong. Because of the extra X chromosome that they have, it will affect their developmental ability. So the extra X chromosome is going to affect them so that they're going to end up having low testosterone. They're going to have some breast development. They're going to have reduced facial body hair, decreased bone density and muscle mass, some learning disabilities. But because their body is trying to produce sperm, and in certain situations is actually able to produce sperm, they are male. So even though they're XXY, because their body produced sperm, or is trying to produce, even doesn't get there, it's trying to. In other words, it formed the male internal and external organs in order to be able to go and produce sperm. They are considered male, even though they're XXY. Most people with this particular condition are going to be infertile, but some of them do produce sperm, okay? There's other situations. Trying to think of which one's easy to talk about. Let me tell you about Imani Khalif, the Olympic boxer. So hang with me, because this one's a little bit, I need my picture, so I'm going to try and do it with words. Imani Khalif, the Olympic boxer. Okay, Paris Olympics. This Italian woman is boxing against this other woman, and they're like, something's wrong with her. This is a trans person. She was kicked out of the International Boxing Association because she was identified female at birth, but she had high levels of testosterone. As soon as they said that, I knew what her condition was. So what everybody was talking about is trans. I'm like, no, she's not trans. She has something called 5-alpha reductase deficiency. Let me explain to you what that is. The body will automatically /default, but it's not a passive default. It's an active default, will form female. That's just what it's going to do, okay? It will form male if the Y chromosome is on the scene. Now, that Y chromosome is not interested in a woman's feelings. It's not interested in like, are you okay if I do this? Like, it doesn't ask permission first. When the Y chromosome shows up, on it is something called the S or Y gene, and that takes the body's production of turning the baby, creating the baby female, and it makes it male. It tells the body you are going to go along the male pathway, okay? And so the S or Y gene is only found on the Y chromosome, unless there's sometimes when it jumps onto an X chromosome and an XX girl she forms male, okay? But S or Y genes generally found on the Y chromosome. And this kind of kicks everything into motion. One of the things that it kicks into motion is the production of the development of testes. The testes produce testosterone. Cool. Testosterone is key because testosterone grows both the internal reproductive and external genitalia of the boy. Okay? So as long as everything's great with testosterone, they're going to be born with things normal. The problem with this particular situation is that the testosterone, in order to form the external genitalia, it actually needs to convert to something called dihydrotestosterone, which is like super concentrated testosterone, okay? And so it needs to do that. And so but in order to do that, there's like a protein or enzyme, like 2AR5D2, whatever it is, that has to help with that conversion to the dihydrotestosterone. And a person with this condition, that enzyme is missing or not functioning, and the testosterone never makes that conversion. Since the body is going to form female unless something tells it to do something different, that testosterone never tells the genitalia to go male. So the baby is born, and you're like, you have a girl. Because nobody's chromosomal testing babies. So they don't know it's an XY. So there you have a girl. So they raise it, put it in bows, and put this baby in dresses. And remember, Imani Khalif comes from Algeria, which is a predominantly Islamic country. So Imani Khalif is being raised with other little girls, wearing the clothes of other little girls, in the bathrooms with other little girls, in an Islamic country. But what happens with this condition, remember I told you that during puberty, testosterone skyrockets? And when it skyrockets in puberty, all of a sudden it's strong enough to actually grow the external genitalia, and their genitalia starts to grow during puberty, and they start to form male. And they're like, oh my goodness, I've been a boy all this time. It's an absolutely devastating condition. There's a couple options here. The parents or the person at that point, sometimes they just stay living female because they're so embarrassed. They're so humiliated. Had this happened in America, what probably would have happened is doctors would give Imani DHT, dihydrotestosterone, that big souped-up testosterone, to just help all the development to happen as normally as possible. Just give it to her in pill form, and she would go male. But this is an Islamic country, guys. How in the world are her parents going to tell the other Muslim families that my little girl that was in the bathroom with your little girls was actually a boy? How are they going to say that my little girl that was sleeping in the same bed with your little girl was actually a boy? What I think happened, and this is just purely my conjecture, is I think when her parents found out, and when Imani found out as a teenager that she was actually a boy, they couldn't handle the cultural implications that would come with that and the cultural consequences, and so they just let her keep living as a girl. What they should have done is not put her in boxing and just let her live her life out. If they wanted to keep it secret, don't put her on a national platform. But they put her on this big, huge global platform, and it all comes out. So Imani is actually 100% male. Probably infertile because the testosterone is important for sperm development, and there's some issues there. But the body is forming on them. Actually has all the male stuff. 100% male. So that is what intersex is, guys. It's when something doesn't develop as it typically should in the reproductive area. And so this young man was absolutely correct. It is a medical condition. It is not people who are trying to be transitioning, male or female, this kind of thing. They don't choose it. They do not choose this. They are born this way. And that's what it is. So if you want to hear that again, episodes 6 and 7 on the podcast, or go to apologetics.org, and I wrote out an article on intersex, and you can read some more. Does that kind of make some sense there, guys? Okay, you have a better understanding. So we need to be careful, because these are very sad situations, people who don't choose this.
And the vast majority of people who are transitioning are people who were born and their bodies formed normally. So
Exactly.
there were no genetic issues in their their birth. So,
Exactly.
so
Exactly
they're
right.
two unrelated issues.
Completely unrelated. And so even with intersex people, because Imani's body's trying to form sperm, is she male or female?
Male.
Male, right? If you form sperm, you're male. Female's your eggs. The chromosomes they get trumped essentially by the gametes, okay? And so you can be X, which is called Turner syndrome, where you just have one X. You're female, even though you lose all your eggs by the time that you're 2. So if you're XY, and that SRY gene, that male gene that makes the body go and form everything male, if it's defunct or if it's somehow missing whatever, you can be XY and form female because nothing told it to go male, okay? So these are medical conditions, genuine medical conditions. It's a tragedy, but these are, in a fallen, broken world, we all deal with stuff that doesn't quite go right, and that's what this is. Yeah.
All right. Well, it is a little bit past our closing
Oh.
time. Thank all of you for sticking around, and let's give Alycia a huge round of applause. And let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord God, we thank you that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And Lord, that your love never fails. Your truth is eternal, and your provisions are with us every day. Lord, thank you for Alycia. Thank you for bringing her here. Thank you, Lord, for the things that she shared. And Lord, we just ask that you would continue to guide us and help us, Lord, to live every day to your glory, proclaiming truth, but always doing so with grace. Guide us and teach us. In your name we pray. Amen.